applies. The law of military occupation applies when a military occupation exists in fact, right? In fact, like it's actually happening. Forget what people are claiming. Even if the requirements of the law of belligerent occupation do not apply as a matter of law, general law of war principles and rules, such as those for the conduct of hostilities, continue to apply. 11.2.1, military occupation as a fact. Military occupation is a question of fact. The legal consequences arising from the fact of occupation, that is, that this fact is the basis for both rights and duties, illustrates how the law of war may be viewed as both permissive and restrictive in nature. And again, Derek, I'll let you just, you can wax lyrical on this when I finish. The fact of occupation is the basis for the occupying power to exercise authority over the occupied territory. The fact of occupation as a requirement for the exercise of authority over the occupied territory prevents a state from simply claiming the authorities of military government over an enemy territory without actually controlling such territory. The fact of occupation also imposes certain duties on the occupying power with respect to occupied territory. The fact of occupation as a requirement for triggering the duties of an occupying power means that a state does not in fact occupy an area, that if a state does not occupy an area, does not incur the obligations of an occupying power. Once an occupation exists in fact, regardless of whether the invasion was lawful or unlawful under jus ad bellum, and jus ad bellum is the Latin term for the law leading to the commencement of conflict, the rights and duties of occupying power and the population in relation to each other apply. This application of the law of belligerent occupation is an example of how jus in bello rules, and jus in bello is the Latin term for the rules for the conduct of war once it's declared or once it's initiated, and the jus ad bellum rules generally operate independently of one another. And so, again, there's a lot in that, but the reason I'm reading that out in full, Derek, is because the Australian people have to start catching up. This isn't a matter of catch as catch can, and I think I've got an opinion, and I think that, this is what should be going on. There are very clear rules set down a long time ago by some very wise people for the conduct of belligerent actions between nations, because we know what happens when there aren't rules, and rules in war to the uninitiated sound like lunacy, but you end up with all sorts of horrific acts if you don't do it properly. But anyway, if you're happy to just talk on that little matter there, and as I said, Derek, I'm aware we're way past that in reality, but as far as 25.69 million Australians are concerned, they have no clue what is really going on, and when it starts to be revealed to them, they're going to have to hang on to something. So if you can talk to that.
11.2 of the Law of War Manual, sir and Brad. So anyway, we're just going to try to backtrack a little bit for the Australians and even some Americans who are listening. But basically what I was going to do is actually go back and read the forward to the Law of War Manual too. I think that's really important because so many people, like I was on a radio show earlier and the guy was like going, holy crap, I hit him with just our foundation alone, that the military came first. Our founders established the military first. They kind of did it, what we call in the military is ass hat backwards. But they actually started the war first. Then they established the military. Then they established the war articles, which would be military law. And then they established the flag. And then they established the Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence, they wrote it always as a future tense, which is amazing to me. And when you read it, it's always in future tense and giving us the right to overthrow any government that goes against the foundation. And it's always in future tense. So that means it's always alive. It's always living. And we always can use that command, as our founders said. So like you said, sir, is that we're always in charge. We're always in command of what we want it to be. We're always in charge of our personal sovereign selves. Now, we can do that collectively, or it's like an old famous movie with George Strait. I can do this. We can do this together. Or I'll do it by myself. But It's obviously it's better when 2 or 3 or 4 are on the same page. But I think this is important to read the forward, because who wrote this manual? It was passed June, or I say passed, it was issued rather as the Department of Defense, the new Law War Manual, June 12, 2015. That wasn't long ago. And then President Trump rolls down the escalator 4 days later. So the odds of that alone, if someone wants to call that coincidence, then I need some reimbursement on what I could have bet on in Vegas, because the odds of that are not there. But the forward says the law of war is of fundamental importance to the armed forces of the United States. See, and I like to reemphasize the people out there. The key word in that whole sentence right there is fundamental. It's just a fundamental, meaning like it should be just kind of like batting your eyelids. So the law of war is a part of who we are. George Washington, as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, agreed with his British adversary that the Revolutionary War would be carried on agreeable to the rules which humanity formed, and to quote unquote to prevent or punish every breach of the rules of war within the sphere of our respective commands. So if you go on down, I mean, people just need to read the forward of these. I won't read the whole thing. The law of war is a part of our military heritage, and obeying it is the right thing to do. But we also know that the law of war poses no obstacle to fighting well and prevailing. Nations have developed the law of war to be fundamentally consistent with the military doctrines that are the basis for effective combat operations. Effective. There's that word always used all the time, effective and efficient. But for example, the self-control needed to refrain from the violation of the law of war under the stress of combat is the same good order and discipline necessary to operate cohesively and victoriously in battle. And then it goes on to tell you in the preface, it specifically shows this manual is a Department of Defense, DOD wide resource for DOD personnel, including commanders, legal practitioners, and other military and civilian personnel on the law of war. And it tells you who wrote this, military and federal attorneys. It talks about United Kingdom's Royal Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force on exchange assignments with the U.S. Air Force. In addition, military lawyers from Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia reviewed and commented on a draft of the manual in 2009 as a part of review. I mean, it's loaded with all of the participants there. But to go to the 11.2, people need to see when the line was drawn in the sand. And yesterday, you two alone with your assessment of World War II is amazing. I hope people get to watch that and really listen to. That was just one war and one war example, right? But every war that we know has a line drawn in the sand before it. It doesn't matter if it's a world war. Doesn't matter if it was a battle, a state. There was always a line drawn in the sand. And there's one that we love down in Texas the most. The colonel over here, Mr. Sellers here, we love the Alamo, right? And a lot of people that don't know the history of the Alamo, the line was drawn in the sand, and William Barrett Travis, he drew the line and he said, boys, men, if you stand on this side of the line with me, you're going to die right here. We're surrounded. We're not getting out of here. But we're going to die as heroes. But anybody who wants to leave, you're going to go off, you'll be a traitor, and you'll go down in history as a traitor. But we're not getting out of here alive. That's why Texans love the Alamo more than they love San Jacinto or anywhere else, because of that statement that he made. And he wrote that in a letter called Victory or Death. It's a famous letter in Texas history, famous letter in U.S. history. That line was drawn in the sand. And he chose that line, and those men that stood on it, they did. They died right there. They perished. But they went down as Texas heroes for the Texas Revolution and the advancement of America. And of course, we all, anybody that's from Texas, native Texas, but especially anybody that's ever lived there, it's the greatest state in the whole United States, in our opinion, right? And we like to say that's not an opinion either. That's a fact. But there was a line drawn in the sand. Donald Trump in the military drew that line in 2016. 2016 was that definitive line. And Americans and Australians and anybody else has to see that first. like I told that radio station today, you got to go back. Everybody wants to talk about laws and orders and the Constitution, but nobody wants to nosedive into seeing what they actually say. Oh, they want to surface talk it, but nobody wants to go back to the origin of that. So the origin of this Law of War Manual goes back. Actually, the Law of War Manual was issued June 12, 2015. But then when you look at what happened, Donald Trump rolls down the escalator 4 days later. Then you had the Military Justice Act, which is also military lawyers again and federal lawyers putting all these things together, and the SCOTUS clarified that military law supersedes all laws. It separates president, commander in chief as two separate roles and two separate laws. And then it also clarified Article 2 of the Constitution, commander in chief, is separate from Article 3 of the Constitution, which is the federal government. Clarified that. First time in history that we have something. Then you move forward and you see the actual placement. And I always tell people there's two narratives that's going on. There's people like us that know what's going on by the laws and the orders and the acts, the statutes, the codes, etc. And then the visuals of that, which are the National Guard. The National Guard, ladies and gentlemen, if you're an American and you know, National Guard are 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. They're not to be out. If they're out of their state jurisdictions every single day for 2.5 years, and out of the U.S. jurisdiction every day for 2.5 years, they're federalized. I mean, and you have to know that the military works on a chain of command, and we work off of orders, and the orders come from the top down. And we got a retired full bird colonel right here, and a retired lieutenant colonel right here. We're talking about two guys who are closer to the top. Oh, Brad and I were way down here. Brad and I were way down at the bottom. We were taking orders that would come down from these guys, and they have to know when this went into action. That's why there was two narratives, right? Two narratives means the people who are awake and know what's going on. Then you got the ones who are oblivious, don't have a clue what's going on. And then I like to just keep those people and the ones that either don't want to or refuse to want to know what's going on. But there's still those that are waking up and they're going, what the heck's going on? When here's what's happening. That 11.2, what's amazing about that is just this past election over here, the November 2022 election, Fox News, even though President Trump even says they're full of crap too in a good way, he's calling out the leadership. He's not talking about the people who are on the air and things of that nature. He's talking about the people who are way up here who owns these things, and putting out more, obviously, content in the future. So people have to know that first. And then two, Fox News had an article, came out November the 4th, 11/4. Right, so there's your mirror, 11/4, and it specifically says, you can go look it up, that the military was going to be perched around, the National Guard in particular, was going to be perched around certain voter precincts on election day. All right, well, when you go look under 11.4 of the Law of War Manual, why, of all things, does it just happen to align with the military occupancy and what would take place with the military occupancy with an election? And Americans also need to know this, that is what a military occupancy does. When the federal government, there's two powers in the U.S. It's real simple, federal government, military. And I don't think enough people understand that the military and the federal government are separate entities. That is why the Military Justice Act clarified that. They're separate entities. At any one point, does a president or Congress go against the Constitution, the military can step in at any time. They haven't done it in history, and they should have, but that's where we are. And that's where Donald Trump, that's when he said it January 2021 at one of his speeches, I've pissed off a lot of rich people, right? And I got to go away for a little while. Well, that's why, because this is a massive operation. The military stepped in when the federal government's in a continuity government, meaning all three branches of government are in a cog. That means the Constitution is paused. And the Law of War Manual is the quote unquote Constitution, if you will, if you want to call it that. It's the military's Constitution. And the military is in the military occupancy. And where that would have been more visual for the sleepyheads out there, the normies, as we call them, and all the comments, all the commentaries we have. But March 27, 2020, Donald John Trump became a wartime president by all the laws and orders that Roosevelt used, 50 U.S. Code, Chapter 33, Section 1541. He became a wartime president on March 27, 2020. When he federalized 1 million National Guard active duty, which really it actually says reserve components, which includes all National Guard, Ready Reserve, everybody. Reserve components means everybody at any capacity, whether you're Reserve or National Guard. That was a direct military order. That was a command from the commander in chief. and he put it in Executive Order 13912, which is in 10 U.S. Code 1209. And then inside 10 U.S. Code 1209, he put 4 codes in there that would call back all officers, retirees, and prior service of the Coast Guard, and also 10 U.S. Code 12302, which is already reserved who are out of the military. I mean, that is powerful. And that order has been extended to March 2024 by Sleepy Joe. Whether people know he's real or not, it doesn't matter. Why would that benefit Joe Biden to extend that order out of federalization of 1 million National Guard active duty, and also calling back all your ready reserves and calling back all of your retirees and your prior service and your officers of the Coast Guard? That wouldn't make any sense at all based off the 2 gentlemen you have. If you want to look apple to apple or orange to orange, Donald John Trump and Joe Biden are daylight dark difference. That order would not benefit Joe Biden if Joe Biden was real.
Derek, you are the fully weaponized man that we need at this moment in history. Well done, mate. You never failed to deliver. Now, let me just, so we can move on to other subjects. I wanted to kick off with that one. And Derek, you've done a brilliant job. We've been talking about, for some time now, the Constitutional Convention, which will be kicking off in 2024 in Australia, regardless of anybody else says. And we have, as you can imagine, a lot of people with their own perspectives on what Australia should look like in terms of a new constitution with the common law people. We've got a whole bunch of other things, Magna Carta and the rest. And what I love about what you've done is you've exactly highlighted that which needed to be highlighted to the people. Now, in our constitution, which is a constitutional monarchy, if the government of the day decides to act unconstitutionally, our resolution of that problem is very different to what you have in the US. And once again, I'm a big fan of what you have in the US. But let's talk about